A broke girl entered the CEO's car by mistake, not knowing he'd fall for her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The rain poured down in silver sheets over downtown Chicago, turning the sidewalks into mirrors of neon light. Ella Brooks clutched her worn-out tote bag to her chest as she hurried out of the cafe where she worked the late shift. Her shoes were soaked, her apron still damp from wiping tables, and her paycheck barely covered half the rent due next week. She pulled out her phone, opened the rideshare app, and sighed when she saw the wait time 12 minutes. The storm was only getting worse. A sleek black sedan rolled up to the curb, headlights cutting through the mist. The driver's window lowered just enough for a man's voice to call out, "Are you Ella?" She barely heard him over the rain, but that was enough. "Yes, that's me," she said quickly and ducked inside. The warmth of the car wrapped around her like a blanket. She shook the rain from her hair, embarrassed by the puddle forming at her feet. The man in the driver's seat glanced at her through the rearview mirror. His voice was calm, deep, the kind that could silence a crowded room. "Rough night?" he asked. "Tell me about it," she muttered, buckling her seatbelt. "Long shift, bad tips, and now I probably look like a drowned cat. Thank you for coming so fast." He smiled faintly, eyes still on the road. "Where to?" "Lincoln Park, near West Webster Avenue." He nodded, pulling into traffic without a word. For a few minutes, the only sound was the rhythm of the wipers and the rain tapping against the roof. Ella leaned her head back, exhaustion weighing heavy. "You must deal with a lot of people like me," she said with a small laugh. "Tired, broke, and praying you do not give up halfway." "Not really," he said softly. "You are my first tonight." She chuckled, thinking he was joking. "Lucky me then." From the mirror, he studied her reflection, her wet hair clinging to her cheek, the faint bruise of sleeplessness under her eyes. There was something honest about her presence, something unpolished but real. When the car stopped at a red light, she noticed the dashboard. There was no Uber sticker, no phone mount, no rideshare meter. Her brows furrowed. "Wait," she whispered, scanning the interior. The leather seats, the faint scent of cedar, the quiet hum of an engine that sounded far too expensive. This is not an Uber, is it?" The man finally turned, a glint of amusement in his gray eyes. "No," he said gently. "It is not." Ella's heart dropped. "Oh my God," she stammered, clutching her bag. "I am so sorry. I thought I saw you stop." He raised a hand, smiling kindly. "It is all right. You looked like you needed a ride." She hesitated, torn between running out into the storm or sinking deeper into the soft seat. "You are not some kind of serial killer, are you?" she asked, half joking, half serious. He laughed quietly, the sound low and warm. "Not the last time I checked." Something in his tone made her exhale. She sat back, cheeks flushed, and murmured, "Well, thank you for not kicking me out." "Anytime," he said, and his eyes lingered on her just a little longer than before. As they drove through the rain, neither of them knew that this wrong car, this tiny accident of fate, was the beginning of something that would change both of their lives forever. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the blinds of a small, cluttered apartment on the west side of Chicago. Ella Brooks sat at her kitchen table, staring at the half-empty cup of instant coffee in front of her. Her hair was still damp from her hurried shower, and her hands were covered in tiny cuts from carrying trays the night before. She could not stop replaying the strange ride from last night, the quiet man, his calm voice, the way he had smiled when she apologized. She groaned softly, burying her face in her hands. "You idiot, Ella, who just jumps into a random stranger's car." She let out a nervous laugh that faded quickly. It had been foolish, but somehow she had felt safe. Her phone buzzed. A message from her landlord appeared on the screen. "Rent due by Friday, or you will have to move out." She closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. Another problem she could not afford. After a moment, she grabbed her apron, slung her tote bag over her shoulder, and hurried to the cafe for another long shift. The bell above the cafe door jingled as she stepped in. The morning rush had already begun. Steam hissed from the espresso machine, and the smell of roasted coffee beans filled the air. "You are late," her manager called out from behind the counter. "Sorry," she said quickly, tying her hair back. The train was delayed. She started taking orders, moving from table to table with practiced speed. By 10 o'clock, the crowd thinned. She was wiping a table near the window when the door opened again, and a tall man in a gray coat stepped inside. His presence drew quiet attention. He carried himself with a calm confidence, as if time bent slightly around him. Ella looked up and froze. It was him, the man from last night, the not Uber driver. For a heartbeat, she could not move. He met her gaze, the faintest hint of recognition crossing his face before he smiled politely and took a seat in the corner. Her pulse quickened. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe he did not even remember her. She straightened her apron and walked toward his table, forcing a smile. "Good morning," she said, her voice a little too bright. "What can I get you today?" He looked up from the menu, his tone light. "Coffee, black, and maybe a blueberry muffin, if you have any left." She scribbled the order quickly, trying not to meet his eyes. Coming right up, when she returned with the coffee, he spoke again, his voice low. "You made it home safely last night, I hope." Ella froze in mid-step. The tray trembled slightly in her hands. You remember," he smiled, just enough for his dimples to show. "Hard to forget a night like that." Her cheeks burned. "I am so sorry about that. I really thought your car was my ride. I swear I am not crazy." "I never said you were," he replied calmly. "You looked cold. I figured you needed the ride more than I did." For a moment, silence lingered between them, warm and awkward. Then she asked, "So, do you drive often? For a living? I mean," he chuckled softly. "Not exactly. It was a long day. I needed a drive to clear my head." "Oh," she said, nodding. "That makes sense." He studied her expression, open, unguarded, tired but full of quiet resilience. "You work here every day, pretty much. Double shifts most weeks. I am saving up for night classes. Design school, maybe." "That sounds ambitious." "It is," she admitted. "But dreams are free." Something about her honesty stirred something unexpected in him. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a small card, and placed it on the table. "If you ever want to show someone your work, call this number." She glanced down. The card read Adrian Hale, Hale Group. The letters shimmered faintly under the light, but the meaning did not sink in. She smiled politely, thinking it was just a business name. "Thank you," she said softly. "I might just do that." As she walked away, Adrian watched her for a long moment. He did not know why this ordinary morning felt different, only that it did. Outside, the sky was bright. The rain washed clean from the city. Ella tucked the card into her apron pocket, unaware that the man sipping coffee in the corner was one of the city's youngest and most influential CEOs, and that their story had only just begun. That night, the city buzzed quietly beneath the glow of streetlights. Adrian Hale sat alone in his penthouse office, the skyline stretching endlessly beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. His desk was a battlefield of contracts and glowing screens. Yet his thoughts were far away from balance sheets and board meetings, to a cafe with peeling wallpaper and a girl who smiled through exhaustion. He leaned back in his chair, replaying their brief conversation. Ella Brooks, a waitress with dreams of design school. There had been something rare about her, a kind of sincerity he rarely saw in the corporate world. She had looked at him without calculation, without knowing who he was. For the first time in months, he felt curious. Adrian's assistant, too, Claire, stepped in quietly, holding a tablet. "Your meeting with Rothman is still confirmed for tomorrow at noon." He nodded distractedly. "Cancel it. Reschedule for next week." Claire blinked. "Sir? Rothman is flying in from Boston." "I know," Adrian said simply, eyes still on the window. "Next week." When she left, he turned the business card over in his hand, the spare one he had given Ella. He wondered if she would ever call. Across town, in a cramped apartment above a laundromat, Ella sat cross-legged on her bed, sketching by the dim light of a desk lamp. Her sketchbook was open to a half-finished drawing of a cafe interior, wooden chairs, soft light, a mural on the wall. Her pencil paused as her eyes drifted toward the small white card lying beside her phone. Adrian Hale, Hale Group. She traced the embossed letters with her thumb. It sounded familiar, like a name she had seen on the side of a building or in the news, but she could not place it. Probably just some small company, she muttered to herself, then laughed softly. Still, he looked way too polished to be an Uber driver. Her roommate, Jenny, peeked in from the hallway, holding a cup of instant noodles. "You are still thinking about the mystery man." "Hey, I am not," Ella said quickly, cheeks warming. Jenny grinned. "You totally are. That is your 'I swear I am not, but I totally am' face." Ella threw a pillow at her, laughing. "Go away." Jenny sat on the edge of the bed anyway. "You know, maybe he really is some big deal. That card looks expensive." Ella shrugged. "Even if he is, it does not matter. Guys like that live in a different world. I can barely afford bus fare." Jenny tilted her head. "You never know. Maybe he was meant to find you." Later that week, Friday came faster than she expected. The cafe was busier than usual, filled with office workers grabbing coffee before the weekend. Ella balanced 3 plates on one arm, weaving between tables. As she set down a cappuccino, something fell from her pocket, the business card. She bent to pick it up just as her manager called. "Ella, phone for you." Line 2. Confused, she hurried behind the counter and picked up. "Hello." A voice on the other end was calm and familiar. "Miss Brooks, this is Adrian Hale. I hope I am not calling at a bad time." Her grip tightened on the receiver. "Oh, Mr. Hale. No, it is fine. How did you—" "I had a meeting nearby," he said, "and thought I might stop by the cafe for a coffee. But perhaps you could join me outside for a few minutes instead." Her manager gestured impatiently toward the dining area. She hesitated, then said softly, "Give me 5 minutes." Outside, the afternoon sun painted the street in gold. Adrian stood beside a sleek black car, the same one from that rainy night. He smiled as she approached, wiping her hands nervously on her apron. "You look less drenched this time," he said lightly. "Thankfully," she replied, laughing. "Chicago rain has mercy sometimes." He handed her a small paper bag. "Blueberry muffins. From a bakery downtown. You mentioned you like them." Her eyes widened. "You remembered." "I remember most things that matter," he said gently. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the city humming around them. Then he spoke, his voice careful. "Ella, I have a proposition for you. My company is hosting a charity design event next month. I need help conceptualizing the layout. You have an eye for detail, I saw it in your sketches." Her heart pounded. "You saw my sketches? How?" "You left one in my car that night." She blinked, speechless. "Think about it," he said, stepping toward the car. "You deserve a chance to show what you can do." And with that, he left her standing on the sidewalk, holding a bag of muffins and a heart that suddenly felt too full for her chest. The next morning, Ella Brooks woke up earlier than usual. The sunlight spilling through her thin curtains felt brighter than normal, though her heart still thudded with disbelief. The words from Adrian Hale echoed in her mind. "You deserve a chance to show what you can do." She stared at her sketchbook on the table. Its corners were bent, the pages smudged with pencil dust and old coffee stains. Yet, it held her dreams. She flipped to a clean page and began to draw the layout for the charity event Adrian had mentioned. Marble floors, warm lighting, soft floral arcs that led guests toward the stage. She lost track of time. By the time she left for the cafe, her fingers were covered in graphite. During her break, she hesitated, then pulled out her phone and searched Hale Group. The results made her freeze. Headlines filled the screen. Hale Group ranked among top architecture firms in the country. Adrian Hale, Chicago's youngest self-made CEO. Her breath caught. The kind stranger who had driven her home, who had handed her a bag of muffins, was one of the most powerful men in the city. For a long moment, she just stared at the screen. "Oh my God," she whispered. "What have I gotten myself into?" 2 days later, she received an email from his assistant. Invitation. Concept meeting. Hale Group Headquarters, DHEA. Monday. On Monday, she stood in front of a glass tower that seemed to touch the sky. The revolving doors gleamed. She wiped her palms on her skirt and took a deep breath before stepping inside. The lobby was grand white marble floors, polished chrome accents, and a scent of cedar and citrus. Behind the reception desk, a woman smiled. "Good morning. You must be Miss Brooks. Mr. Hale is expecting you." The elevator ride felt endless. When the doors opened, Adrian stood by the window, hands in his pockets, gazing out over the city. He turned as she approached, his expression softening. "Ella, I am glad you came." "I almost did not," she admitted. "I looked you up. You are not exactly a barista with a nice car." He smiled slightly. "No, I am not. But I am also not someone who offers opportunities lightly." She followed him to a large conference table covered with design blueprints. "This is the event space," he explained. "We are partnering with several nonprofits to support young artists. I thought it would be fitting for you to contribute." She blinked. "Me? But I have no experience with corporate events." "That is the point," he said. Fresh eyes see things differently. They spent the next hour sketching ideas together. She was nervous at first, but Adrian's calm guidance eased her. He asked her opinions sincerely, never interrupting. For the first time in her life, someone listened as if her thoughts mattered. At one point, she pulled her old sketchbook from her bag. "I thought about what you said," she murmured, flipping to the new design. "I tried something with light and flow so people feel welcomed, not intimidated." He studied the page quietly. "This," he said finally, "is brilliant." Her cheeks warmed. "You really think so?" "I do. You have talent. Ella, do not hide it behind coffee cups and double shifts." The sincerity in his voice made her chest tighten. For a moment, she forgot who he was, the CEO, the millionaire. He was just Adrian, the man who had once driven her through the rain and treated her like she mattered. As the meeting ended, he said, "I would like you to join the design team for this project. Paid." "Of course." Her eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "Completely," he replied, holding out his hand. "Welcome aboard." She shook his hand, her heart racing. "Thank you. I will not let you down." "I know," he said simply, watching her leave. When the elevator doors closed, Adrian lingered by the window again. Down below, the city stretched endlessly. But for the first time, it did not feel lonely. Somewhere between a mistake and a miracle, he had found something real, and he was not ready to let it slip away. Over the following weeks, Ella Brooks's life shifted in ways she had never imagined. Every morning, she arrived at Hale Group's headquarters with her sketchbook tucked under her arm and a nervous energy she could not hide. She was no longer serving coffee to strangers, she was presenting ideas to architects and designers in glass-walled rooms that overlooked the city. At first, she felt like an imposter. The staff spoke in polished terms and wore clothes that cost more than her monthly rent. But Adrian Hale never treated her as less. He asked for her input, encouraged her sketches, and introduced her to everyone simply as Ella, our new creative partner. Each time he said it, her heart lifted a little higher. Their collaboration quickly grew into something deeper. Long afternoons stretched into evenings as they worked side by side, surrounded by blueprints and the scent of coffee. Adrian would sometimes lean over her shoulder to study her designs, his voice calm and curious. "You think in feelings, not just shapes," he once told her. "That is rare." She laughed softly. "Maybe because I have lived most of them." There were moments that hung between them, quiet but charged, like the time she dropped her pencil, and he bent down at the same moment, their hands brushing, or when she caught him looking at her reflection in the glass and quickly turned away. It was never spoken aloud, but it was there, growing like a spark, neither dared name. One late evening, as the office emptied, Adrian offered to drive her home. She hesitated, smiling nervously. "You sure you trust me in your car again?" He smiled back. "I trust you more than most people I know." The drive through downtown Chicago was quiet, the city lights glowing like constellations in motion. Ella looked out the window, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is real. A month ago, I was counting quarters for bus fare. Now I am helping design an event that people like you actually care about." "People like me?" he asked, glancing her way. "You know," she said, half laughing, "rich, successful, too busy to notice the rest of us. He smiled faintly. Maybe that used to be true. But lately, I have been noticing things I did not before. She turned toward him, curiosity soft in her eyes. Like what? He met her gaze briefly before looking back at the road. Like how much life I have missed by staying at the top alone. Her chest tightened. The sincerity in his tone made her pulse quicken. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words stayed trapped in her throat. When they reached her apartment, he parked under the flickering streetlight. For a moment, neither moved. "Thank you for the ride," she said finally. "Anytime," he replied. "You have a big day tomorrow." The final presentation. She nodded, gripping her sketchbook. "I just hope they like it." "They will," he said, "because it is you." She smiled, then stepped out of the car, the cold air biting her cheeks. As she reached her door, she turned to see him, still waiting by the curb, headlights dim, watching until she was safely inside. The next morning, the final design presentation filled the air with excitement. Executives, investors, and media representatives gathered in the main hall. Ella stood near the display, her sketches mounted on elegant boards. Adrian introduced her personally, his voice confident. This project began with a simple idea that beauty does not come from luxury, but from sincerity. Miss Brooks reminded us of that. When she stepped forward to speak, her hands trembled, but her voice did not. "We wanted a space that feels alive," she said, "a place where every visitor feels seen, no matter who they are." The room erupted in applause. Adrian smiled, proud and certain. That evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, he found her alone on the terrace overlooking the city. "You did it," he said quietly. "We did it," she corrected, smiling up at him. For the first time, he reached for her hand. She did not pull away. The night hummed softly around them. And in that still moment, neither was a CEO nor a waitress. They were simply two people who had found something extraordinary in a mistake that was never really a mistake at all. The night after the presentation, Ella Brooks could hardly sleep. Applause, laughter, and flashes of camera lights still echoed in her mind. She kept replaying the moment when Adrian Hale took her hand on the terrace. It had felt natural, warm, yet terrifying in its honesty. He was her boss, her mentor, and a man whose world was light years away from her own. The next morning, her phone buzzed with notifications. Articles about the charity event filled her feed. Hale Group's new face of community design. Young waitress helps transform corporate vision. Her picture, her smiling nervously beside Adrian, was on every news site. She dropped her phone, heart racing. "Oh no," she whispered. At the cafe, her coworkers stared with wide eyes. Jenny ran to her, holding up her phone. "Ella, you are literally on the news. Do you even realize who you are standing next to?" "I do now," Ella said, cheeks burning. "I just did not expect all this attention." Jenny grinned. "Girl, you worked for him for weeks. Do not tell me there is nothing going on." "There is not," Ella said quickly, but her voice faltered. She was not sure if that was still true. Meanwhile, across the city, Adrian sat in a meeting room filled with executives. The board members were thrilled about the project's success. But one of them, Mr. Wexler, spoke with a cold smile. "Impressive result, Adrian. Though some of us wonder if your personal interest in Miss Brooks may have influenced your decisions." The room fell silent. Adrian's jaw tightened. "My interest is in talent and integrity. Miss Brooks earned her place." "Of course," Wexler replied smoothly. "Still, perhaps it would be best to maintain distance. For the company's image." Adrian said nothing more, but his hands clenched beneath the table. That evening, he called Ella. "Meet me at the cafe near the river," he said. His voice was calm, but she could hear something restrained beneath it. When she arrived, he was already seated by the window. His expression, thoughtful. "You have seen the headlines, I assume," he said. "I have," she replied. "People are saying things." "Adrian, that we," he interrupted gently. "Let them talk. The work speaks for itself." "But it is not just work anymore, is it?" she asked quietly. For a long moment, neither spoke. Rain began to fall outside, soft against the glass, just like the night they first met. Finally, he said. "The board wants me to distance myself from you. They think our connection could damage my reputation." Her eyes widened. "So, what are you going to do?" He looked straight at her. "I am not going to pretend you do not matter." Her breath caught. "Adrian, you do not have to risk everything for me." "It is not a risk," he said simply. "It is a choice." The waiter approached with 2 coffees, breaking the tension. She wrapped her hands around the warm cup, trying to steady herself. "When I got into your car that night, I thought it was just a mistake," she said softly. "Now I am not sure if it was luck or destiny. Maybe both," he said. "Maybe the best things start by accident." They sat together in silence, the world outside fading into a blur of rain and streetlights. Yet, even as warmth filled the space between them, doubt crept quietly in. Later that night, Ella returned home to find an envelope slid under her door. Inside was a glossy invitation. The annual Hale Foundation Gala, honoring partners in innovation. At the bottom was her name, printed beside Adrian's. Her heart skipped. It was their project being celebrated. But beneath the excitement lay a quiet fear if the world already questioned her place beside him. What would they say when she walked into that ballroom on his arm? She stood by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass, and whispered to herself, "No matter what they say, I know what is real." Across the city, Adrian stared out from his penthouse balcony at the same storm, whispering the same thought. Neither of them knew that the gala would change everything, the night that would reveal not only his love, but the truth she was never meant to discover. The night of the Hale Foundation Gala arrived like a dream wrapped in nerves. The ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers, golden light, and the soft hum of a live orchestra. It was the kind of world Ella Brooks had only seen in movies. Men in tuxedos, women in flowing gowns, photographers flashing at every turn. She stood at the edge of the crowd, her hands clutching a small silver clutch that Jenny had lent her. The dress she wore, a simple navy blue gown, was borrowed too, but it made her feel brave. When the doors opened and Adrian Hale entered, conversations quieted for a heartbeat. He looked effortlessly composed, wearing a black tuxedo that matched his calm confidence. Their eyes met across the room. He smiled gently, the kind that spoke to no one else but her. As he approached, the crowd seemed to fade. "You look stunning," he said softly. She laughed nervously. "You look like every magazine cover ever printed." He chuckled, offering his arm. "Shall we?" As they walked through the hall, whispers followed them. People turned, murmuring. She caught fragments of conversation, her name, her background. The word waitress. She kept her chin high, but her stomach tightened. Adrian noticed and leaned closer. "Ignore them," he said quietly. "They see only the surface." She nodded, forcing a smile. "That is easy for you to say." Halfway through the evening, the host called for silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," the voice boomed, "please welcome our guest of honor, Mr. Adrian Hale." Applause thundered as Adrian stepped onto the stage. Ella stood near the side, heart pounding. "Tonight," he began, "we celebrate not just architecture, but heart. Innovation means nothing without empathy. The project we are honoring began with one person's vision, a young woman who reminded us that design is not about prestige, but about people. Please join me in recognizing Ella Brooks." The spotlight shifted. Gasps rippled through the room. Ella froze, her eyes wide. People turned toward her, whispering again, but this time, it was admiration mixed with surprise. Adrian gestured for her to join him on stage. Hands trembling, she stepped forward. As she climbed the steps, she could feel every gaze on her. Adrian smiled, pride shining through his composure. "You changed how we see our work," he said, his voice carrying across the hall. "You reminded me personally that greatness is not measured by wealth, but by sincerity." Applause filled the air. Ella felt tears sting her eyes. For the first time, she was not invisible. But as the evening continued, not everyone shared that warmth. Near the back of the ballroom, Wexler, the same board member who had questioned Adrian, spoke quietly to a group of investors. "He is risking the company for sentiment. Look how he parades her like a trophy." The words were sharp, cruel, and loud enough to reach the wrong ears. Ella heard them. Her chest tightened. Suddenly, the lights, the applause, The music it all felt suffocating. She excused herself from the table, slipping out toward the terrace, where the cold night air bit her skin. A few minutes later, Adrian followed. "Ella," he called softly. She turned, eyes glistening. "You should go back inside," she said, her voice trembling. "People are talking. Let them," he replied firmly. "I do not care what they think, but I do," she cried. "They are saying you are using me, or that I am using you. I cannot be the reason they tear you apart." Adrian stepped closer. "You are not the reason, Ella. You are the reminder of who I wanted to be before all this power made me forget." She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You do not understand. You belong to that world in there. I never will. Then I will leave it," he said without hesitation. She looked at him, stunned. "Do not say things you will regret." "I will regret letting you walk away," he said quietly. But she did, with one last look. She turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving him standing alone beneath the city lights, caught between the world he built and the one person who made him feel human again. Inside the ballroom, the music played on. Yet for both of them, the night that had begun in brilliance ended in silence, and a love born from a mistake seemed to fade into something neither knew how to save. The following days passed in a blur of headlines and silence. The newspapers called it the Cinderella scandal. Photos of Adrian Hale and Ella Brooks from the gala spread across every site, his hand at her back, her face glowing under the lights. The media twisted it into a story of romance and ambition. At first, Ella tried to ignore it, but every click, every whisper at the cafe, reminded her of what she had lost. She quit her part-time job without telling anyone and disappeared from the city center. The gala dress hung in her closet like a reminder of a dream that was never meant for her. She told herself it was better this way. He would move on, and so would she. But deep down, she felt like she had left a part of herself on that terrace. Across town, Adrian sat alone in his office. The skyline outside looked gray and endless. Every decision he made felt hollow. Wexler and the board had gotten their way. They insisted he release an official statement calling the relationship a misunderstanding. He had signed it, not because he believed it, but because he could not let the company collapse over a truth the world was not ready for. Afterward, he locked himself in silence. The foundation project, the one Ella had designed, was still moving forward. But every meeting without her felt empty. Her sketchbook still sat on his desk, the worn cover smudged with pencil marks. Inside the front page, she had scribbled a quote, "Design is about connection, not perfection." He ran his fingers over the words and made a decision. 2 weeks later, the Hale Foundation Gallery opened its doors to the public. The media believed it was another corporate event, but Adrian had planned something else entirely. The exhibit space glowed with warm amber light. At the center stood a collection of drawings mounted under glass, Ella's sketches, her concepts, every detail she had ever shown him. The sign above read, "The Art of Ella Brooks." As guests entered, murmurs filled the room. "She is the waitress, right? The one from the scandal? Why is he doing this?" Adrian ignored every voice. He stood near the entrance, waiting. Meanwhile, Ella walked past the gallery by accident. She had been out delivering coffee to a client when she noticed a banner fluttering outside. Grand opening, The Art of Ella Brooks. Her steps faltered. For a moment, she thought she had imagined it. But when she peeked through the glass doors, her breath caught. Her drawings, her messy, imperfect sketches filled the walls. She stepped inside, her hands trembling. At the far end of the hall stood Adrian, watching her with quiet hope. "You did this," she whispered when she reached him. He nodded. "It was never my story to tell. It was yours. I just gave it a place to live." Tears welled in her eyes. "Why, Adrian?" After everything they said, "Because truth matters more than reputation," he said softly. "You taught me that." For a long moment, they stood in silence, surrounded by her art. The crowd faded, the noise dimmed, and all that remained was the quiet hum of something real returning. Then she saw it, a small glass case near the center of the room. Inside lay her old sketchbook, open to the page where she had drawn the layout for the charity event. Beneath it was a small card that read, "For the girl who taught me how to see." Her voice broke. "You kept it." "I kept everything," he said. "Even the night you got into my car." She laughed through her tears. "That was still the dumbest thing I have ever done, and the best thing that ever happened to me," he replied. As the crowd began to applaud, Adrian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He did not kneel or make a speech. He simply opened it and said, "No titles. No headlines, just us. Will you stay?" Ella looked at him, at the man who had seen her not as a mistake, but as a miracle, and whispered, "Yes." The applause swelled around them as the lights dimmed. A story that had begun with a wrong car ended in the right place, two hearts finally finding their way home. A few months later, spring finally reached Chicago. The snow melted into rivers along the sidewalks, and the city hummed with new life. In the middle of it all, the Hale Foundation Gallery had become a quiet symbol of hope. Tourists, students, and artists visited daily, many stopping before the central display, the framed sketchbook of Ella Brooks, the girl whose story had changed how people saw art, love, and class. On a bright Sunday morning, the gallery prepared for a private event. Staff placed fresh flowers along the marble steps, and a small orchestra tuned their instruments. Inside, the soft hum of conversation filled the air as friends, family, and colleagues gathered. In the center of the hall, under a canopy of hanging lights, Adrian Hale stood straightening his tie, though his usual composure was broken by a rare, nervous smile. Then the doors opened. Ella appeared in a simple ivory dress, her hair pinned loosely, her eyes bright and full of peace. The crowd fell silent as she walked toward him. Every step seemed to echo the journey that had brought her here. The rain, the wrong car, the laughter, the heartbreak, and the courage to love again. When she reached him, Adrian's voice softened. "You are still the same girl who once climbed into a stranger's car," she smiled, "and you are still the man who refused to let me get out." Laughter rippled through the room. The minister began the short ceremony. There was no luxury, no extravagance, only sincerity. As they exchanged vows, Adrian's eyes never left hers. "I found everything I never knew I needed in the most unexpected place," he said. "You showed me that love is not about power or status, it is about truth." Ella's voice trembled slightly as she replied, "You reminded me that even ordinary people can inspire extraordinary change. I once thought I did not belong in your world, but you proved that we could create a new one together." When the minister finally said, "You may kiss the bride," the room erupted in applause. Outside, church bells rang as if the whole city joined in celebration. Later that evening, after the guests had gone and the lights dimmed, they stood together in the empty gallery. The walls glowed softly around them, the sketches still shining under glass. Ella ran her fingers over one of the frames, the first drawing she had ever made for the foundation. "It feels strange," she said. "This all started because I made a mistake." Adrian wrapped his arms around her shoulders. "The best mistake either of us ever made." They walked to the center of the hall, where the glass case held her sketchbook. A small plaque had been added since the opening. It read, "From a wrong turn to the right, love dedicated to those who dare to believe in second chances." She leaned against him, resting her head on his chest. "Do you ever think about that night?" "Every day," he said. "It reminds me that sometimes fate does not shout. Sometimes it whispers." Outside, the rain began to fall softly, tapping against the glass ceiling. Adrian smiled. "Do you realize it is raining again? It feels like the world is starting over." Ella laughed quietly. "Then let it rain. It brought us together once. Maybe it is just saying congratulations." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small keychain from his car. The same one she had gripped nervously that first night. "I kept this," he said. "It reminds me how something as simple as an open door can change a life." She took it from his hand, her eyes glistening. "Then let us keep it. As proof that we never really got lost, we just took the scenic route." They stood there for a moment, surrounded by light, rain, and the quiet hum of forever. The city outside glowed, alive and infinite. And for Ella Brooks and Adrian Hale, what began as a misunderstanding had become a love story, written not by chance, but by choice, a story the world would remember simply as the best mistake they ever made.